Okay, interesting news this week from Nintendo in a post on X, aka Twitter. Nintendo itself has posted that they're going to be announcing, they have announced, in fact, that Nintendo Switch software will also be playable on the successor to Nintendo Switch. Loving the
Wow.
language used here. They're also saying that Switch Online will be available on the successor to Nintendo Switch as well. Further information about the successor to Nintendo Switch, including its compatibility with Nintendo Switch, will be announced at a later date. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. It's saying, first of all, the software will be playable on it, and then it's saying for further information, further information will be announced at a later date. Okay, right. John, this was pretty much a given, right? But it's nice to see it actually confirmed.
Yes, indeed. It's good to hear about the cold keiki, as they call it, the Nintendo Switch successor machine that they keep referring to, where you can feel like legal has been all over this to ensure that nothing is said out of place. But yes, this is good news and something we've been hoping for, right? Because fundamentally, the Switch has become Nintendo's most successful system of all time, home console, I guess.
Hmm.
And as a result, there's a lot of owners out there and a lot of software out there. And I feel like not offering backwards compatibility would have instantly torpedoed its potential success, because when you look at the audience as a whole, like what I think there's at least a large percentage of Switch owners that don't care that much about the graphics horsepower. They're not thinking about it. But they might think about this new system for other reasons. But if they can't use their old library, there's a good chance that they may just nope out, so to speak. And the reason we were so worried about this is that Nintendo has had a poor track record on the console space with backwards compatible machines, despite having pretty good backwards compatibility in the past. Their digital libraries have not carried over well at all. Knowing that they will allow that to occur this time is extremely important, I think, and is key to its success. Because again, Nintendo Nintendo has often dropped the ball with these successor consoles, right? It's
Yeah.
not always a smooth transition for them. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons it's taking so long. I'm sure these guys are extremely nervous about this launch because they have such a comfortable thing going. And if they mess this up, the gravy train stops, basically.
Yeah. Alex,
Hmm.
Digital Foundry's number one Switch fan. Do you have
I got
do you
stuff
have
to
any
say.
thoughts about this? I mean, it looks like a really simple, logical decision, right?
Yes, and I think it points also toward the work that NVIDIA and Nintendo have put into the hardware side of things to make sure that even generationally different CPUs and GPUs from different architectures, especially on the GPU side, will remain backwards compatible in spite of the fact that in fact, probably a lot of Nintendo made as well as a couple third party made titles were using the lowest level APIs there, which will be more hardware specific. So making sure that there is good enough hardware and or software emulation for those specificities is great. On the business side of things, there's two things I'm kind of interested in is the fact that it having good backwards compatibility means you kind of don't have the ability as well to sell remasters anymore. Because the old title is now just what you can say is running on the new one. Nintendo has had a couple remasters, but usually been titles that have been from consoles from yesteryear. Things where there just wasn't an up to date modern version to be sold anymore. They've done the less. They haven't shown off really yet. They're going to go the Sony route and have like PS4 titles being remastered or whatever. They haven't shown that yet, but that kind of makes it so that they can't do that as easily from a business perspective because people just have access to it. And Another thing that isn't kind of clarified here, business wise, they just talk about backwards compatibility, but it doesn't say, cartridge or digital. I'm presuming it means both. In which case it would mean cartridge backwards compatibility, which is not necessarily a given. If that is what they mean, or does it mean like Does it mean like you can like register your copy as a digital one?
No. I would say they're gonna continue with the cartridges. I think cartridge compatibility was always more likely than digital, right? Because that's what they've always done in the past. And I don't think there's any reason for them to change the cartridge size format, right?
I was thinking mainly because for example, the new part of the Switch is like hardware decompression block, sure, internal storage. And I'm assuming games are going to be built around that. And so they're either going to require installs then to maintain the performance that developers expect, or they're going to have an interface for their new cartridges, which doesn't require installs, but is extremely fast and competitive with the internal SSD. So that would mean, I guess, like that they have like an interface. Either they require installs for their next games, which would be interesting, or you can run from new cartridges that as well as fit in the old cartridge slot, but the new cartridges are way faster. Yep. They're just going to be way faster, which means more expensive.
I think the cartridges are going to be way faster, Alex. I think the leaks are suggesting a 256 gigabyte SSD on there. The concept of selling a cartridge which then installs onto that, you're not going to get too many titles onto there, first of all.
No.
Secondly, I think they've probably engineered a really fast standard for the cartridges that is backwards compatible with the slot of the first one. I think that's kind of like what people would expect. When you consider the Nintendo audience, I can't imagine that they're going to be wanting to sit there waiting for an install bar to complete PS3 style. So I think it is basically going to be a cartridge slot that is backwards compatible, but also switches into a faster mode for Switch 2 software. I think that just basically makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we had some supporter questions about this, but it was all universally down to one thing, really. Do you think that there's going to be a boost mode for existing software, which is to say that the capabilities of the new CPU and GPU will be brought to bear on existing Switch software? Now, this is an interesting question because we know from overclocking the existing Switch that all games just basically continue to function and work exactly as they should. I've not really heard of any scenarios where overclocking has produced software errors that you might expect. But at the same time, Nintendo itself doesn't really have a history of improving performance of existing software via emulation or whatever. I've been thinking about this, and I think I've said it before, but I just think it's probably going to be more effort to actually slow down the system to match the older specification than it is simply just to run them as is, run the software as is, as much as the hardware is capable of. And I think that's probably a good thing because, recently we've seen games that just have some technical issues on the existing Switch that could stand to be smoother on the new one. A lot of games are using dynamic resolution scaling. Those games would stand to benefit from extra GPU power. I'm just questioning whether Nintendo's going to allow it to happen, but I don't know. What do you think, John?
Ooh, that is tricky indeed. I feel like there's a better than usual chance that they will allow this time, based on what you said. Given the hardware specs, actually slowing it down would introduce its own challenges. But at the same time, there could be compatibility issues that we don't know about, right? And is it in Nintendo? Would Nintendo offer like a system level option to overcome that? Like that's very not Nintendo, right? Like you look at the 3DS. I leave my 3DS overclocked all the time, and 99% of the time, no problem. It makes games run faster. The new 3DS, by the way, the new 3DS has faster hardware that would only engage with specific titles. But you can actually make it run at that full speed all the time with Homebrew, right? There's one game that doesn't work, and it's Ridge Racer 3D. I don't know why it doesn't work, but it just crashes. And that's the only title I've ever seen that doesn't work properly with it, which is why, like, we can say that, yeah, the overclocking on Switch has largely been problem free, but there could very well be like one or two random titles in there that don't work properly. And is that going to would the fear of that influence Nintendo to then not allow these improvements? That's what I don't know. But like you say, because the hardware is so, just due to the design of it, it almost seems like they would just let it run faster. Maybe it's really, really tough to say what's going to happen just because it's Nintendo.
That's true. I mean, one thing that could be done is what Sony has done with PlayStation 5 for PlayStation 4 backwards compatibility, where basically it has a whitelist of games that can run at full clock with the new hardware. And then there's like select titles where I'm presuming there was some kind of compatibility testing, and that compatibility testing failed. So they actually throttle back the frequencies of the CPU, I believe, in order to make it work. The example of that, which seems to show the most evidence of it actually happening, is Assassin's Creed Unity, which in its unlocked OG disc mode doesn't run at 60 frames per second, while the Xbox versions run just fine and have actually had an FPS boost patched to it. But elsewhere, it looks as though Nintendo Switch 2, it's Nintendo has a plan. They're not going to tell us what the plan is, except to say we will make an announcement about the successor to Nintendo Switch within this fiscal year. So, we just have to wait for their fiscal year to expire. Well, I guess that's going to be at some point next year, early next year, Q1. But that's kind of about it for Nintendo Switch 2. Obviously, as soon as news does, quote unquote, drop, we'll be there to react to it. But confirmed backwards compatibility can only be a good thing.